So today's project, 2013 Kawasaki KX250F. This is a customer slash subscriber vehicle, and they're stumped on it. Backstory from what I understand, picked up the bike, rode it a half a block. She shut down. Turns out it dropped a valve, went in, replaced the head, the valves, all that stuff. Now can't get it to start. So we're going to see what we can do to help them out. Now, before we go to this fancy intro screen, throw down in the comments what would be your first step on diagnosing this with the information that I just gave you, because that's what I've got. I'll be right back. She definitely feels like she's got plenty of compression. First step, check if there's fuel in the bike. Stinks. Might sound funny, but I've had customers bring me bikes before that wouldn't start and it was no gas. Super simple. So obviously what I'm going to try to do is kick this thing up, see what it does. Okay, there's not even a attempted poppage. So the first thing I'm going to do, pull this valve cover off and take a look at that camshaft timing. I don't know if it was him or the guy who had the bike before him, but they did a pretty good job of getting some nice looking bolts in there. I guess it wouldn't hurt while we're right here to go ahead and throw a spark plug in this thing and just make sure it's cracking. Okay, we got a spark. Even with the spark plug out, this thing is really kind of hard to push. I'm going to turn this crankshaft anti-clockwise or counterclockwise until we come up to top dead center. That's the piston at its topmost travel on the compression stroke. And you'll know you're on the compression stroke because none of the cam lobes will be pushing down on the tappets at all. I like to use a long screwdriver and go right down the spark plug hole, and this way I can see when the piston is at its top center. So already our intake and exhaust cam timing is off from top dead center. Now we want to be sure that our half moon clips don't fall down of the timing chain housing, because then you'll have to try to fish these things out. So just be cautious of that. It's got some scoring in there already. Go ahead and throw a zip tie around your timing chain, so if it does fall down inside the crankcase, you can fish it out pretty easily. Go ahead and hold this timing chain and run the engine around. And it feels fine. There's no drag whatsoever. And I'm just going to go ahead and get this back up on top dead center. At this point here, without the camshafts in, it doesn't really matter. There's only going to be one top dead center at this point. And at this point here, you can rotate the engine forward and back if you have to. The screw, you'll feel it like right on the crankshaft. It feels like it's a really loose spot when you rock it back and forth. The screwdriver's not going up or down. It's like right in the middle. So before I drop these cams back in, we're going to put a little bit of red Loctite. No, don't do that. This is Ultra Slick Assembly Lube. This will eliminate dry startup dragging before the oil has a chance to get up. And we're going to put that on the journals and on the lifters. Now, we didn't move our crankshaft at all. The front half of the chain is tight. You can see it rotates. You want to have it just tight and that dot lined up with the cylinder head. And then there'll be one at 12 o'clock. We'll go ahead and drop our intake cam in. This one can sometimes be a little trial and error. Although this one, they're making it pretty easy to get in there. Looks like it's going to go one more tooth. Some of these can be a struggle. Now, I probably should have asked him if he put a new timing chain in this thing, because it looks like this one could potentially be stretched. The intake cam is not lining up 100% properly, but it's not terrible. All right, exhaust timing mark is lined up. Intake timing mark is just a touch below the head. I think this chain might be stretched just a little bit, but that should be definitely enough to get this timed properly. Let me get this top cap back on. Don't forget your retainers. On these Kawasaki's, make sure that O-ring is in there. I'm not real happy with that scoring, but it's not melted. Put a little bit more lube on these journals. Drop all your bolts back in. Remember, there's one longer bolt that's going to go in place number 5. That's one thing that's good about Kawasaki, is they actually label the cam cap so you know what sequence to torque it to, or torque it in, I should say. Now, before you all panic, I'm just going to run these bolts in slow just to save myself some time. I'm not doing any torquing. These cam cap bolts and your cylinder head bolts are going to be the most critical bolts to be torqued and sequenced correctly on the entire bike. Before we get to torquing these caps down, stick your finger down in the hole, make sure that O-ring didn't kind of pop out of there. Sometimes it'll sneak out on you, then you got to take it all back apart again. Kawasaki's calling for 87 inch-pounds, and we are going to abide by that. Now, once you tighten down your cam caps, make sure your camshafts still rotate freely. If they're stuck or hanging up or dragging, you got an issue. Your cam cap's either warped or distorted or something like that, and you will need to... Unfortunately, they don't sell the cam cap separate, so you would have to buy a complete head. They're bored with the head from the factory. Now, I'm not saying that you can't get a used cam cap off of eBay and make it work. And there's also a couple little things you can do to potentially loosen these up. But the biggest thing I could tell you is torque it properly. That's going to be key. Go ahead and get this tensioner back in before we rotate this engine. This particular bottle has a spring and a pin. Make sure those both go back in. Now we can go ahead and do a full couple of rotations here. Make sure we're going counterclockwise. So everything feels like it's spinning free. We'll go ahead and drop our screwdriver back down and get this thing back up on top dead center, compression stroke. There we are. Timing marks are good. That chain is really loose. I don't like that. We may end up having to put a timing chain in this thing. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and do a compression test, and then possibly a cylinder leakage test if it fails this test. All right, so Kawasaki's wanting 63 to 105 at 5 kicks, wide open throttle. And I've got about 75, so our compression looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the valve cover back on, drop in the plug. We'll see if this thing fires up. It's definitely kicking much easier than it was. I don't know what was going on there, but I don't know if he had these cam caps too tight or what. There's also an O-ring between the valve cover and the cam cap as well. Make sure that's in there. All right, so we got spark, we got compression, we need fuel. That's the triangle. Got to have spark, got to have compression, got to have fuel. Okay. Now what I want to do is just sprinkle a little gasoline mixed with some 2-stroke oil. I'm going to pull off the air filter, see if she pops off that way, and then we know we're chasing a fuel problem. Well, there it is. We just diagnosed it. It's got a fuel problem. So what we need to do now is start doing our fuel diagnostics. Get this tank off, get 12 volts hooked up to this tank, see if that pump's pumping. All right, so we're going to check our fuel pump, make sure that's running. Obviously, this thing could spew gas, so put a hose down into like a gas tank or something like that so that you can hold on to it. Be very careful about making sparks around fuel. And you want to also be careful about these connectors. They're really small. You don't want to stuff like a big chunky something in there and bend them, because then you might have issues with them not making connection. So I have these very fine points, and we're going to just follow red positive, black negative. Just remember that my blue is going to be my negative. Let's connect this thing to a battery and see what we hear. Okay, pump's running just fine. So it's not an issue with the fuel pump itself yet. It is pumping, but we don't know if this thing's holding any kind of pressure or anything like that. So a fuel pressure test is going to be our next big step here. All right, so we're going to hook our fuel pressure tester up to the system. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Mr. Rooster, we just tested it and the pump's working. Why are we testing anything else? Well, there's two different things. So the pump is pumping, which means it's flowing fuel, but this thing may not be putting out 3 psi. And this bike is going to require 43 psi just to run. So what I've got is my tester hooked up, and just the return line that would go into the bike itself, I just have that blocked off. We're going to clip this onto the tank, and we should see this gauge come up to 43 and then stay there even when the power's disconnected. So I'm not sure if y'all can see. So we know it's flowing some fuel and we can hear the pump running, but we have exactly 0.0 psi, which means that this housing inside here is either cracked, or the O-rings are bypassing, or the fuel pressure regulator has failed and it's hung wide open. So it's just internally bypassing. We're going to go ahead and pull that fuel pump out of here and take a look at that in depth. So this is our fuel pump assembly. So a couple different things can be happening. There's a couple different O-rings in here, the top and the bottom of the pump, and on the regulator itself, those could be bypassing. Sometimes there's a crack in the plastic, which I'm not seeing, which could also cause the fuel to spill out. And this regulator itself could have failed, you know. That's possible. Plus the pump could be no good. Now they do sell rebuild kits for these, so if there's an issue with the pump, we can get a pump, and we can also get a regulator separate. They don't sell them Kawasaki. You have to buy this entire unit for like $1 million. I don't know what it is, $400, $500. All right, so man, so that pump pumps up through this center, pressurizes this entire chamber, and this chamber goes out to your fuel injector, and this has to maintain pressure. So there is an O-ring down inside here for the output. But what don't you see down inside there? Yeah, there's no O-ring, and there's no O-ring on the pump at all. So what's happening is this thing's just going to bypass internally. I don't know what happened to the O-ring because he said the thing ran, but there's a lot of garbage in there, so more than likely it's just disintegrated. Let me wash this out and replace that O-ring, put it back together, and do another pressure test. I'm going to go ahead and replace both of these O-rings. Use a little dielectric tune-up grease on them to help them slide in. They don't get kinked or damaged. So if these O-rings were okay and you didn't see any cracks in the plastic anywhere, more than likely it's going to be the regulator that's failed. Some of these pumps, they'll only go in one way. I believe Kawasaki is that style. The bolts won't line up, so it'll only go one direction. There, let me get all this gas cleaned up that's been spilling all over the bench here before we make any sparks, and do a retest. All right, let's double check this. Whoa, look at that. 43 psi. Now this should also not drop immediately right to zero. It should hold some residual pressure. The pressure will drop over time, obviously, but we don't want it to drop immediately. So this looks great. We're going to go ahead and get this back on the bike and almost guarantee we just fixed our problem. I wanted to mention also another sign that you may have an O-ring issue or some kind of issue with your fuel pump is when you take the tank off and gas is leaking out of your pump while it's just sitting here. More than likely it's leaking out, and it shouldn't. So what I always do with my fuel injection bikes is give them 3 or 4 fast kicks just to pressurize the fuel system, and then give her the master kick. She needs a little eyelid. And then this thing, it's not even a vent. It sounds like it's just wheezing for fuel too. Wheezing for air. Gotta turn this idle up. It's way down. All right, so it runs, but it sounds like the thing's got some more issues. I'm kind of kicking myself in the butt a little bit. Probably should have checked these valve shims while I was in there. We have to take that back apart again. Yeah, she's clacking around something wicked. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and pull off this oil filter cover and give it a couple kicks with the tank disconnected just to see if this thing's pumping oil. There's a spring inside this cap. They have a tendency of getting lost, so keep an eye open for that when you're pulling this apart. Sometimes you can use your 8mm socket, stick it in there, and just kind of wobble it out. The filter looks brand new and clean. Let me go ahead and give this thing a couple kicks, make sure oil's pumping. I'm pretty sure it is. Okay, so we're not having an issue with oil. It's just the valves are out of shimmage. All right, we got her back up on top dead center, compression stroke. And let's go ahead and measure up these valves. So what we're going to be looking for is between 0.1 to 0.15 millimeter on the intake and 0.17 to 0.22 on the exhaust. Now, this should be done stone ice cold, and the motor's not hot, but it's a little bit warm from just a quick run. We're going to take that into consideration a little bit. Now, I don't know how easily I'm going to be able to get in here and show you with my big hands in there, but these are the sizes we're looking for. So 0.10 should go through, 0.15 should not go through. And again, that's on the intake side. And you're going to go between the cam lobe and the lifter. And 0.10 falls through. And I'm sure 0.15 is going to fall through as well. Yeah, so next what I want to do is just keep taking measurements, incrementally getting larger and larger, 0.18, 0.20, until I find out where my clearance is on each one of these. And then we can do our shim calculations at that point. But let me go ahead and take a measurement on my exhaust. I don't have a 0.17, so we're going to go 0.18. And again, that should fall right through. And then I don't think I have a 0.22 either, but we'll go a 0.23. And if that doesn't go through, then I'm going to call the exhaust okay. And that falls right through too. Okay, so what I need to do now is just keep continually taking measurements until I find out where the next feeler gauge will not go through, and write all these down. All right, so these final numbers are all kinds of crazy. I got 0.30, supposed to be a maximum of 0.22. On the right side, front exhaust, I got 0.50, and it could be even bigger than that, but my feeler gauge is getting too thick to get around the corner, so I'm going to have to try to bring that into spec with that and then remeasure it. And then I got 0.30 and 0.40 on the intake, so they're way out of whack. This right here is the formula you want to use. Pause the screen, write it down, take a picture, and this is going to tell you how you're going to adjust your shims. So what we need to do now is pull our cams back out, and we are going to take the shims out that are in each of these positions and measure those with a caliper of some sort, micrometer. Even though this thing's way out of whack, the shims are nice and thick, so that's good. That means these valves aren't banging into the head. We have 2.6, 2.6, and the good news is we're just going to go thicker. 2.6, maybe we just threw 2.6 in all the way around. 2.8. So we're basically going to use this calculation. A is what we're looking for. And if you remember the old school, you just basically follow this arithmetic right here. If you remember in school, you always do parentheses first, PEMDAS, if you remember that. So we're going to do B minus C plus D. So this is going to be B. We're going to go on the higher side of this mark. So we're going to be looking for 0.22. That's going to be Z, or C, I should say. And then D is going to be our present measurement on our shims right now. So B minus C is going to be 0.08 plus D 2.8, 2.88, which I don't have. We could go a little bit thicker. If we go to 2.90, that is going to put us at 0.20, which puts us right in spec. So 290 is the one we want for that one, and we'll just do the calculations on all the rest of them. All right, so all the circle numbers are what we come out with as what we have to put for shims. So 2.6 has to go to 2.75, 2.6 needs to go to 2.85. Where are we at here? 2.8 needs to go to 290, and 2.6 needs to go to 290. All right, once you get your new shims in, throw your lifters back on, and then we can just go ahead and drop our cams in. We don't have to worry about the timing chain or anything like that, because we're just going to double check our measurements. I don't want to have to set a timing chain up and all that stuff. So it makes it a lot easier to just drop our cams in. When we do our inspection, we just want to make sure our timing mark on our cam is lined up. Now, to do this measurement properly, you have to have the cam cap on, and you have to have it torqued properly. You literally cannot measure this by holding the camshaft down, because it's not going to be correct. Again, make sure your timing mark is lined up and hold your cam right there before you go ahead and start stabbing it with your feeler gauge. Okay, 10s are going through. 15 is not going through, so we're right in spec on the intake cam. $18 going through. Just make sure 23 doesn't go through. No on this one. And it does still go through on this one. This is the one that was like super high. So we might have to go one thickness more on that one. And then we can just put our cams together at that point. We'll go 25 here, 1/4 millimeter. $25 still goes through. And 28 is really dragging. So if we go one size thicker, that'll put us right at 0.22, and that'll be in spec. All right, throw a 295 in there. Get our cam chain back on and our timing set up properly now. We should be able to bolt this together, and our valve shimming is done. Righto, so while we're waiting for this timing chain to get in, this new timing chain, so we can put our cam cap back together and get the top end done, the customer asked me if I could test his old fuel injector. He bought one thinking that might have been the problem. So we're going to go ahead and just do a spray pattern on this for him. So I just built this little contraption here with a stand, machined this piece out, and what this does is it just holds this fuel injector so that I can pressurize the system. And then I got a base plate here that will hold the injector from blowing out at the 43 psi that we need to run this at. Now in this tank up here, I have ultrasonic cleaner, and that works really good on these fuel injectors. I'll go ahead and get my air supply hooked up to this, get this thing pressurized to 43 psi. I'm all out of love, so lost without you. There you go, about 43, 45 psi is good enough. Now we'll open our supply to our injector. Yeah, good sign here. We're not seeing any leaks, drips, anything like that coming out. So that's good. The injector's not leaking. I have a cup that I generally stick under this thing so I can run a cleaning cycle on it. But just so we can see the spray pattern, I'm going to go ahead and leave that off for right now. Make the mess for y'all. I got this cheap little injector pulser off of the old Jungle website, I believe, and it was fairly inexpensive, so it's going to make it real easy to test. Cut one of the ends off and put a connection for these fuel injectors on there, make it easier. The great thing about the cleaner that I run is it's non-flammable, so don't have to worry about fires or anything like that. That's good. It's doing like a medium pulse, high speed, long pulse. And then it's going to be a continuous. So nothing wrong with that spray pattern. It looks good. This injector is perfectly fine. Thanks, Javier. While you're in here, always go ahead and take a look at your screen. I'll put a little cap on the end of the crankshaft. We just want to protect those threads. When it comes to engine timing components, this is what you want to look for right here. Genuine. Any bolts internal in the engine, I like a drop of blue Loctite on them just so they don't back out and cause damage inside the engine. So got the new timing chain in, easy enough, right? We'll just go ahead and follow that procedure that we did earlier in the video and reset all our timing back up again. I just want to show something before I go any further. The difference between an aftermarket timing chain and a factory timing chain. If you can see, your timing mark is perfectly lined up with the head, which I was struggling with the aftermarket or stretched chain. These chains are relatively cheap, between 20 and 50 bucks. It's just not worth it to put $11 Chinese chain in this thing and take the risk of it breaking and causing major damage to your engine. I'm going to finish getting my tensioner in here before I rotate this engine. You never want to rotate this engine without the tensioner in. Timing chain could slip. There we go. Top dead center. Timing marks are perfect. Chain is perfectly tight. All right, again, I'm going to go ahead and recheck these valve clearances before I go any further. Let's kick her again. The idle still needs to come up. There's still something wacky going on here a little bit. The noise from the valves is gone, but there's something every once in a while slapping around inside this engine, and it does not want to idle properly. The idle all the way up, she revs up fine, but as soon as you turn the idle down just a little bit, she wants to die. So after getting a haircut and talking to my customer, he wants to go ahead and continue along with the diagnostics on this bike. First thing that I want to do is see if there's any codes in the computer. This year model Kawasaki does not have a indicator light up here, so we're going to have to attach one, hook a battery up to this thing, and see if there's any codes in the system for anything in the fuel injection system that could be causing a problem. I'm going to disconnect our capacitor because we're going to have to hook up a 12-volt power source. Up on the neck of the bike, there's going to be a couple of things we're going to look at. On the left-hand side here, we're going to have this 4-way plug. We go ahead and disconnect this. And there's also a yellow wire with a connector right here. We're going to unplug that from the harness as well. I'm going to go ahead and hook up this launch control button. And then to get into the diagnostics mode, we're going to have to ground this terminal. So I'll just go ahead and put a connector on it for now. I have this harness made up because I do a lot of diagnostics on these. And this will plug in, gives me a positive and negative lead to go to a battery. When you connect this, you'll hear the fuel pump run. Next, you want to just go ahead and ground that terminal anywhere to ground. And we should get some flashing lights here shortly. All right, with this light continually flashing, it's basically telling me that the ECU is not finding any issues with any of the sensors right now. In other words, there's no opens or shorts to any of these sensors. That doesn't necessarily mean that the sensors are in specification. So there's nothing right now. What I want to do now is go into what they call dealer mode 2, and this is going to, ECM or ECU is going to store the codes. You can't erase them. You need a special Kawasaki computer to actually erase the codes. So any codes that might be in this system will still be in this ECU. So the way we want to do that is we'll disconnect our ground. We're going to ground it, remove it from ground, and then ground it 3 times fast within 3 seconds. This should show us any codes that are stored in the computer. It's 1 long, 2 long, 3 long, 4 long, 2 short. So 42. Let's see if there's anything else. 1, 2. All right, so the computer's telling us we have a previous code in here of 42. And if we look at our service manual, 4 long, 2 short, upstream injector malfunction, wiring open or short. So my guess is that this upstream injector, which is the injector in the air box, was disconnected at one time while this thing was kicked. So it has stored that code, but is not a current code. Well, this just means now that we're going to have to go sensor by sensor and check them to see, if the peak output voltages and resistance values are where they need to be. I'm also going to go ahead and pull off the muffler and make sure there's no restrictions. Yeah, it seems to be flowing fine. So before we start any of this testing or anything else, you want to go ahead and get your service manual out. You are going to need a lot of information and specs in there, and also some reading glasses if you're an old man. So first thing in the DFI system under troubleshooting, if you go to unstable or rough idling, it's going to give you potential fuel pressure issues. We know our fuel pressure is right at 43 psi, and that's great. Upstream or downstream injector issues, which is a possibility. I believe like I said, he replaced the downstream injector. We tested the old downstream injector, and being new, I would say is probably not an issue with that. And then the 4 main ones are going to be your throttle sensor, intake air pressure sensor, a MAP sensor, water temp sensor, and the intake air temperature sensor. So these are the 4 sensors we're going to concentrate most of our energy on, starting with the throttle position sensor. If you need a service manual, I'll have a link down in the description for emanualonline.com. Click that link, gives me a little bit of a kickback. You get a better price on the manual. Use their code. If they give you a better discount, there's a code in the description as well that'll give you 22% off anyway. So, and they have manuals for everything you could possibly need. So let's go ahead and get into this. Now, there are some special tools you're going to need to do this. You're going to need a digital multimeter, and a lot of these tests are done with the connectors connected. So you will need some kind of piercing tool. Now, Kawasaki sells special adapters that go in between here with leads coming off, and so you can connect your meter to it. Most people are not going to purchase something like that. What I got are these leads right here that have very, very fine pinpoints, so I can get in there and get some resistance measurements without like spreading these terminals apart. If you put something really big in there, like let's say the tip of the multimeter, it's going to damage the terminal ends. You can see the difference here. Hopefully you can see the difference there. So we're going to set for DC voltage, and we want to make sure it's good for at least, your range is good for at least 12 volts on this first measurement. And what we're going to do is get a voltage, input voltage for our throttle position sensor. And your multimeter is going to be, you have 3 wires here, a yellow, a blue, and a black. The black is going to go to the black. And it doesn't matter which side you go in, whether you go on the harness side or the sensor side, as long as you make a connection. And to get our input voltage, our positive is going to go to our blue. And now we'll reconnect our battery and take a look at our voltage. So we're getting 4.97 volts. That's perfectly fine. We're looking for right around 5 volts. So now we're going to take a look at our output voltage. And we're going to switch our red lead, our positive lead, to the yellow lead. Change our range on our sensor to 6 volts because this is going to be less than 1 volt. Connect our battery, see what we come up with. So we're getting 0.557. They're wanting between 0.58 and 0.62. So that is a little low. We want to get within this range. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen the screw on the throttle sensor, and we're going to turn that until we get this into that range. So we can loosen up the clamps and go ahead and turn the throttle body down a little bit to get access to that screw without having to pull the whole thing out. It's still pretty tight, but we should be able to get in there. I'm going to turn this thing so it's between 0.58 and 0.62. So we'll go right around 0.6. It's very sensitive. We'll just tighten it up right there. Once you get it dialed in, blip the throttle a few times. Make sure it goes back to where it's supposed to be. We're still in spec. And tighten everything back up. Now I just want to test the resistance of the sensor. Disconnect the sensor, and from the sensor side of the harness, we're going to go across black and blue. Set your digital multimeter for a range. Unless it auto ranges, but we're looking between 4,000 and 6,000 ohms. And we got about 5,174 ohms. There's nothing wrong with this throttle sensor. While you've got these apart, make sure that they're clean. No major corrosion or dirt in there. If there is, clean that up. Use a little bit of dielectric grease. Will help them go together and keep water out. Alright, so now we'll just move on to the intake air pressure sensor. So this is your sensor right here. There is a hose that goes down to your throttle body. You want to make sure that hose didn't pop off or is damaged or cracked or anything like that, because that can cause a lot of issues as well, but this one's fine. And now we're going to go ahead and get an input voltage on this one as well. We're looking for our positive is going to be red with yellow, black, gray. And this is with the sensor connected. And same thing, 4.97, so our input voltage is perfectly fine. And now what we're going to do is change our positive over to the blue lead, and we're going to get our output voltage measurement. Now this is going to be very dependent on atmospheric pressure. And what they're looking for is a measurement somewhere between 3.8 and 4.2 volts at standard atmospheric pressure. They do have a chart in the manual and a special testing procedure with vacuum pumps and all kinds of stuff. It's very, very complicated. Just for right now, I'm going to go ahead and call this good because it is within the proper range that we should be at for atmospheric pressure. If there's any doubt, I might swap this out with a known good one just to make sure that that's not going to be an issue. Let's check the water temperature sensor and the intake air temperature sensor. So the water temperature sensor is located on the back of the cylinder head. Again, this is going to be an output voltage test. We have a white and a gray lead. Our positive or red lead on our DMM is going to go to the white, and the black will go to the gray. Now, one thing we want to keep in mind before we hook the battery up is this is a temperature sensor, so it's going to be 100% temperature dependent. And this test is meant to be done at right around 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius. And we're looking for a voltage of between 2.8 and 2.97. Let me check my range. Let's get to 6 volts. Now we're about right around 68 degrees on the block. And we're right around 72 degrees in the shop. So that measurement is off for sure. So I'm getting about 66 degrees on the sensor, and our voltage is a little high. We'll slightly warm that sensor to get it up to 68 degrees and see where our resistance value falls. With this heat gun, it won't take long. We'll blow right past it, but try to put a little heat on it. You can see our resistance value is falling. So we're getting about 71 now, and we're still high. So what's happening is I have to heat this water temperature sensor to about 80 degrees before it's in spec for 68 degrees. If the bike thinks it's 80 degrees, the engine's 80 degrees, when it's actually 68, the air-fuel ratio is not going to be correct. And it's probably just exponentially going to get worse from there. All right, let's check the intake air temperature sensor. Your intake air temperature sensor is right by the shock on the left side of the bike in the air box itself, this connector. And we'll have a light blue and a gray. Our positive is going to go to the light blue, negative to the gray. And we're going to be looking for about 2.28 to 3.43 DC volts at, again, 68 Fahrenheit, 20 Celsius. And our output voltage on this is perfectly fine. This falls right between where it needs to be. So we don't have any problem with the intake air temperature sensor. The water temperature sensor is off. And we did do some adjustments on the throttle position sensor. I'm going to go ahead and get a new water temp sensor in there. And we're going to restart this and see if that made a difference. 2.46 on the old temp sensor, about 2.6 on the new sensor, and they're both at the same ambient air temperature. You can also drop these sensors in 104 degree Fahrenheit water and then check a resistance measurement there at some arbitrary number that Kawasaki came up with, I guess. But they're a lot smarter than I am, so they know what they're doing. Right, so I put the new temp sensor in there, refilled the cooling system, put the fuel tank back on. Let's go ahead and give this thing a couple kicks and see if we made any progress whatsoever. This thing just, like when it gets down towards idle speed, it feels like it's dragging, like something's really dragging on this engine. All right, let's do a cylinder leakage test here. See if we got any kind of issues. This thing's perfect. Putting 70 in, got about 68, 69 on the outside. No leaks in the exhaust valves, no leaks in the intake valves, no leaks in the cooling system. Okay. All right, so I went ahead and pulled the throttle body. I wanted to make sure that none of the nuts have been loosened. You want to check that paint to make sure it's not broken in any of these spots, because you cannot adjust anything here, and if you do, the throttle body is going to be no good. So while I'm in here, I am going to clean this thing really well, and I'm also going to pull this injector out and do a spray pattern on it. The injector definitely looks new. The seal looks good, so no issues there. Alright, I've gone all over these systems with a fine-tooth comb, still doing the same thing. She'll will not idle. I have to hold throttle, and in fact I have to give it about half throttle just to get it to start. She revs up fine, but just will not idle. It feels like it's really dragging and just wants to shut down. I went ahead and just swapped out the throttle body and all of its associated pieces with a known good one. Didn't make any difference. Swapped out the CDI with a known good one. Didn't make any difference. And so I'm looking back at mechanical at this point here, and I'm digging in a little bit closer on this timing setup, and we had an issue with the timing mark not lining up with the window properly at top dead center. So it's close to top dead center, and I'm just going to lightly rotate it forward and backward, and what I'm looking for is that screwdriver to be at its highest point, which is like right there. And this is where I set my timing marks up. So the timing marks, you can see, are perfectly aligned with the head. However, this is where I'm having an issue when I'm looking at this. Now this keyway, when this is on top dead center, should point directly up the engine, about 15 degrees off from where it's at right now. So if I turn this 15 degrees off where it lines up, it goes up the head, this mark lines up with the timing mark in the window. But the screwdriver is already heading back down again, which is telling me I have one of two potential issues with this. One would be that the connecting rod is bent or twisted, which would cause my timing marks to not align properly. Secondly would be if there, well, technically would be three things. So if the webs were off a little bit, but this thing would vibrate like crazy, and it'd have to be off quite a bit to be off 15 degrees. And lastly, if there was some kind of damage to this key or keyway. And I did not pay close attention. I wish I would have paid a little bit closer attention when I had this apart originally. So I'm going to have to redo some work here, and I'm going to pull this flywheel back off and take a look at that key and the keyway on the crankshaft. Well, okay. I think I may have just discovered the entire problem here. It's so easy to miss looking at it. And that is awfully strange. So I don't know if you can tell, but it looks like this key is partially sheared. See if I can get this thing out of here. So what that's going to do, and this makes total sense to me now, that's going to throw my timing mark off. That's crazy, right? How did that get sheared like that and not snap off? It's going to throw my timing mark off. It's also going to throw my ignition off. And this rattling I'm hearing in the engine could potentially be like a pre-ignition kind of thing because the ignition timing is off. This, however, would be good news. I will try to line this back up again. It looks like it should be like right on top dead center right now. Well, this is kind of a crazy thing, and it's definitely a learning experience for me. I've never seen anything like that. You know, I've seen them shear right off before, but never be kind of just kicked over like that. So hopefully it'll be a learning lesson for you guys too, but I mean, we're still not out of the woods. I don't know if that's 100% the problem, but that would make perfect sense. Well, give this another shot. So I'll tell you, this is going to be a lesson learned for me. I'm going to check that crankshaft keyway first thing whenever we got an issue from now on. So definitely learned something here. The other sensors were showing out of spec. They definitely needed adjustment. Some of them needed replacement. They just, however, were not the problem. And they probably weren't off enough to cause any kind of major issues. A temperature sensor can definitely cause starting issues for sure. 20 degrees, I don't know. It could potentially, but let me get the seat and shrouds back on this thing. And let's take it for a quick rip. It looks like we got this thing. Well, that's going to do it for this one. I hope my pain, agony, and aggravation save you a lot of the same. I feel like I was able to give a good general overall view of a diagnostic procedure on an engine not running correctly. So with that, I'm going to end this here. Thank you guys so much for everything you do for me for the channel, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, buying the merch. Shirts are 25% off right now in the merch store. Get yourself a service manual. I got a link down in the description. And when you use that link, it gives me a little bit of a kickback and it helps me fund these projects. Thanks again. And stay tuned for the next episode. We don't have to stay tuned because there's really nothing going on, but you know what I mean. Next episode comes out. Check it out. Peace.